let's talk about the rest of the employee life cycle. So what does neuroinclusion mean in the context of the entire employee life cycle?
It can mean the difference between belonging and feeling like you're siloed, and that you're on the outskirts looking in. And often, like in school and stuff, you see different cliques and all that types of stuff. If you're not looking at inclusion as part of the full employee life cycle, it can feel like you're sat on the outside of all of these cliques where people know what's going on. And when companies look at reasonable adjustments, often they're looking at the day in the life of, but there's so much more to it.
Hello and welcome to the Plumm Pod, where we talk about all things HR and mental health. I'm your host, Georgia, and founder of Access HR. On today's episode, I'm joined by Lucy Wilson, and we talk about the importance of being neuroinclusive throughout the entire employee life cycle. Lucy shares such valuable tips, tricks, and insights based on her background as a neurodiversity inclusion specialist. Lucy, hello.
Hey.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode.
Thanks for having me.
I have seen a lot of your content online, and that was why I reached out to you today, and I'm really excited for us to get below the surface of your most common topic. But before we do, I want to talk about you, and I want our listeners to get to know more about Lucy. And there's one question that I ask every single guest. And the question is, was HR part of the plan, or did it happen by chance?
I think to pretty much every person you've had on, it happened by chance. It's been about me starting to understand myself and understand my neurodivergence and want to make a difference. And then that's kind of led me into supporting HR, DE&I learning and development teams. So yeah, it's definitely been a journey of discovery. And I think I would say I probably had that stereotype of HR before all of this, which has changed, which is great. But yeah, it was kind of stay away rather than jump into, I'll be honest.
Hey, a lot of people think that. I had a stereotypical perception before I joined the industry as well. And when I actually went into it, I was like, oh, this is something I want to do. I'm a people person at the end of the day. So it was a really natural fit. Could you tell me a bit more about where you are now in your career?
Yeah, so I've just started my own company, Mindshift Empowerment, towards the end of last year. And it's there to help businesses to understand their neurodivergent employees and offer them support through end-to-end process through all of the employee life cycle, so that they really get to the point where they're neurodivergent individuals and everyone else can thrive. And I've come from a background of probably being that middle person. I was very much like a people manager. So I was doing some of that kind of HR stuff without having, I guess, the HR title. And I started to see what difference could be made and supporting with employee resource groups. And that's where kind of my passions come from, and seeing the difference that it can have when it's done right and when companies really embrace it.
Amazing. So for today, I would love if we can really focus on neuroinclusion throughout the entire life cycle. I think a lot of people hyper-focus on certain stages, whereas I know we were really strong to make sure that for today, we talk about the entire life cycle. So let's start with the beginning of the life cycle, which is recruitment. Do you have any examples of how we can get started to be more inclusive with our recruitment?
I think there's so much that can be done in this area. And I guess it depends where you're starting in the recruitment process. Like, are you really kind of going right from the beginning and understanding your business culture and how you want to portray that out to people? Are you looking at your job descriptions, and are they looking at specific requirements of universities, or are you looking at the skills that people need? And when you start to look at these things, it doesn't just unlock for neurodivergent individuals, it unlocks for so much more. But if you can start to get into that, as kind of someone who is autistic myself, like, I really struggle with, I will read something and take it as fact. I will take it as literal. And for me, I mean what I say and I say what I mean. And I kind of expect everything around me to be the same. And when I read a job description that is telling me I need to have 5 years experience, if I've got 4.5, I wouldn't apply for it. So it's about like, what skills do you want from that experience to be kind of included in the job description? And when it comes to interview processes, oh my God, I just can't understand why the interview process is what it is. Because when do you have a conversation with someone where you're sat down for an hour and a half in a lot of people's roles, where you're just constantly bombarded with questions and not having to deliver anything? It's a strange kind of representation of real life. Whereas I've seen people thrive when the job interview has been going into a science lab, doing work with people, having conversations around showing people what they can do. And then you see the real side of people, not that fear, I'm going to answer the question wrong, I'm not like ready for any of this, I don't know what's coming. So there's so many ways that we can adapt that process so that it enables more people to want to apply for the role, and therefore you're getting such a broader group of people that are going to apply. And that's what you need. You need inclusivity, you need different people to kind of build innovation, creativity. Whether you think your role is creative or not, every role needs an element of that to keep moving forwards.
And the recruitment is the first experience and the first taster of the company that we are portraying to any candidate. I love how you've just given examples of more of a practical interview and a hands-on and a real life experience as a way to make sure we are being more inclusive. A danger that I'm seeing at the moment is interview processes that are, well, what feel to be unlimited when we've got 7 or 8, 9, 10, 11 stages that are going on. And at the same time, I don't think that allows inclusivity.
No, not at all. And not even telling people up front. And if you're applying for multiple job roles, like how can you work that out in your head where you're at and what you're doing? So yeah, having multiple stages that isn't kind of said up front. And I think a really good thing to be doing if you're someone who is neurodivergent yourself is asking the company for their policies and processes when it comes to DE&I, inclusion, what's like reasonable adjustment processes. Do you have that written down? Because that will give you a real insight as to whether that company understands what they need to do or whether they're just flying by and hoping that no one asks. There are like a lot of things out there where people think they've got the process nailed, but actually no one seems to understand who's responsible for which part of it. And again, I think it's similar in the recruitment process. And if you're a candidate on the other side of that and you don't know who you're going to, that increases the anxiety around it. And what we have to think about is that neurodivergent individuals' anxiety is already high on a day-to-day, normal, everyday kind of process. They're probably at a neurotypical's neuron stressed. So if you're adding additional things on top of that because you haven't clearly stated what the process is that they're going to be going through, how many steps they have to go through, what kind of interviews they are, you're just adding to that stress, and it's not giving them the best example of your company, because you might be great when they walk in the door, but that's the first thing they're going to see, right? And you want people to want to work for you.
I completely agree. And also as employers, you mentioned then around the candidates asking to see policies and procedures. I also think employers should be doing more as part of their process rather than waiting for somebody to ask for a particular policy or process. We want to be building an experience that we're really proud of throughout every stage of the life cycle. Just thinking outside of what you've already recommended, do you have any other recommendations that employers could be doing to reduce the stress for any candidates?
In the recruitment process?
Yes, for the recruitment process.
I would say that there is this massive gap between having your interview, getting offered the role, and then starting. It could be a month, it could be 3 months, and that's obviously the point where you're leaving potentially another company. But if you're leaving that gap with nothing, your likelihood of this kind of spiral of anxiety increasing is massive. If you can give people a conversation during that time, picking up the phone, like, what's your expectations? Let's have a conversation with your new manager. What's your first day going to look like is a massive thing. And there are some amazing companies that are starting to put out their handbooks and their new starter processes online. So it's not a surprise when you walk in the door. And I think the other thing as well is, what does that first week look like? What does that first day look like is a really important thing. I think a lot of us will check our diaries on a Friday to work out what we're doing next week.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't even have an email address, if you don't know what you're walking into, that's stress. If you add being kind of neurodivergent on the top of that, and you don't know anyone in that company, and you're walking in with having no information at all, it can add so much more to it. And a lot of companies have kind of these unwritten rules where you can't take sick in the first 3 months because it's seen as a negative thing. Well, if you're already increasing that anxiety levels, the likelihood is that that person may need to take some time off sick. Because of it, like, if we can reduce that, we can reduce the risk of them being off and reduce the risk of them not making their probation period or having it extended, which is additional admin for everyone, right?
Yeah. Honestly, you saying all of that, I feel like my head is just nodding. I'm just nodding. I'm like, yes, you've got it absolutely spot on. But so many aren't doing that. And I think it comes down to the transparency with candidates during that entire experience. Let's talk about the rest of the employee life cycle. So what does neuroinclusion mean in the context of the entire employee life cycle?
It can mean the difference between belonging and feeling like you're siloed,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're on the outskirts looking in. And often, like in school and stuff, you see different cliques and all that types of stuff. If you're not looking at inclusion as part of the full employee life cycle, it can feel like you're sat on the outside of all of these cliques where people know what's going on. And when companies look at reasonable adjustments, often they're looking at the day in the life of, but there's so much more to it. There is the start, like we said, there's the recruitment process. But then when people are in the door, if they want to progress in the company, for example, they have to go through that recruitment process again, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not apply for jobs because that was so stressful the first time. They don't want to go through all that stress again. Things get looked at differently when you're recruiting internally versus externally. Sometimes companies can be really good at putting all these things in for new starters, but when someone applies for a job internally, it seems to just go out the window and it gets forgotten about. I think the other thing that is really important when looking at employees' kind of life cycle is the piece about feedback and how you give feedback. So many people don't necessarily know how to do that in the right way. And that can do all sorts of things when you're kind of like neurodivergent in your mind. And rejection sensitivity disorder is a big thing for people who are neurodivergent, or it can be a big thing, I should say. So one, being able to understand how to give feedback in a way that is helpful to people, but also kind of coming back to that, I mean what I say and I say what I mean. Giving fluffy feedback isn't going to help me understand. It's going to it's going to make people way more confused. So being quite specific in the feedback of, this is what you did, this is the impression that it gives me. Like, you're late for work every day. The impression is that you don't care about the job, or the impression is that you don't value this meeting. This is why I need it to be different. You want to give the customer, you want to give your staff an experience that they feel valued as well. Helps to really kind of resonate and pass on that message. So that why is incredibly important, I think, within the language piece. And when it comes to feedback as well, we all have our own bias and we have to be really careful of that. But at the same time, again, I see so much feedback that goes through managers. So the feedback will go to a manager and the manager will have a conversation with their employee, but they'll add their own spin to that, right? Which maybe their own bias on situations or maybe misinterpreted. If companies can really embrace that 360 feedback, you get different perspectives that hasn't come through a funnel, hasn't come through a bias, it hasn't come through a different lens where people can look to take on board what they want to. Not everyone has to take on board every piece of feedback, right? So there's lots of different pockets of things that can be looked at, and I could probably talk about it for days. But for me, like, I am very much about giving practical solutions. I am a problem solver by nature, and I like to be able to give different variations of answers for what you can do about it.
And just then you were talking around the hidden struggles with feedback in particular and unstructured feedback. And this is where I think it's really, really important that line managers and every line manager has training on neuroinclusivity and neurodivergent team members and how to support. Because I think a lot of the time we don't ask our team members questions of how do you like to receive feedback. We deliver the feedback in the way that we like it to be given to us, not how somebody else would like it in their perspective. And that's where workshops, webinars, education streams can be really helpful for leaders, which I know that's a lot of the work that you're doing as well. Are there any other examples to be more inclusive throughout the life cycle that our leaders who are listening can start to work on and take some notes for?
I think I would say challenge your status quo, challenge your thought process. We are very much brought up in a specific way. We're brought up in a way that you have to know how to do a handshake, and a handshake is an important part of how you manage people and how your status is and all these types of things. There is so much behind a handshake. And I personally am not a big fan of handshakes in the first place. Add all that pressure on top of that, add all the kind of unknowns and I don't know what you're going to take out of this. It becomes a big thing. And we have to look at like different cultures as well and take examples from that of eye contact in certain cultures is not seen as something that everyone does and is valued. We value it as a sign of trust in the UK. Does it really mean trust? Does it actually mean that I trust you any more or that you are more trustworthy because I can look you in the eye? For me, it's like looking into someone's soul, and I need to really like you to like be comfortable with that. I look around people's faces. Does that mean you can trust me any less? Does that mean I'm not going to get the job done? No. So as leaders, we need to be questioning a lot of these things of why do we have some of these unwritten rules? What do they really mean and how are they benefiting us? Because you could be forcing people to do certain things that they're really not comfortable with. And the other side of it is you can be excluding people that might be really good for the job. I've been in meetings where I spent the whole meeting under a table. I've been able to participate. I've put my hand up above the table and answered questions and done what I needed to. Did that make me any less of a valuable colleague at that point? Because I couldn't deal with the lights? No.
And what could have helped you in that moment?
I should have been better with myself, to be fair. Like, I probably shouldn't have gone into the office that day, for example. But then it comes down to, do the systems in place in the workplace enable you to do that? Do you have technology that enables you to have really good hybrid conversations? Because we've all been on the phone where we can't hear that one person at the end of the meeting room. So again, it's so much that to kind of unpick as to, I could have stayed at home. I could have had that conversation laying on my own floor. Would I have been able to hear everything else? Probably not. At the time, I had a really supportive group around me that I'd forgot my fidgets that day. I'd forgotten all sorts. I had friends giving me things off the back of their phones that I could play with. But some of that was on me to change the way I thought about it. But then some of that was on the company to be able to enable me to feel like I could do that.
That's an incredible example as well. And I love the self-reflection. But also, you're absolutely right. There are parts that a company can do. So you were talking about the lights. Is that room a suitable environment to hold that meeting? And this is where, as employers, we need to stop being reactive and be more proactive with our strategies and our processes. And if potentially we're thinking, I don't know where to start, ask the right people.
Yeah.
Start to have conversations with your team as well. You spoke before around ERG groups. Could you tell me a little bit more about the employee resource groups?
Yeah, so I think employee resource groups are an amazing resource within a company to be able to help you see your blind spots, help you see where potentially the problems are, help you also see what are the amazing things that you're doing that you may not even understand yourself. And they also really help to bring community. They help people to come together and feel like they're more accepted, because if you're the only person that is maybe has a neurodifference in your team, again, that can feel quite isolating. But if you know that there is more of you in tech, there is more of you in the business, the community element can bring a real difference to things. And that there's so much value in it. The flip side to that being is don't rely on them to solve the problems.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't create these problems. So don't put it out all on them to say, tell me what the problems are, tell me how to solve the problems, and also go out and do it. Because they're there to support each other, and employee resource group chairs often get a lot more work than they should do because they're trying to fix a lot of these problems.
And the challenges as well with ERG groups, more often than not, we're doing them and we're participating in them because we really see the value. It's not anything extra or, any extra time is given in your day for it. You've got to do it alongside your day to day. Do you have any examples of any really great outcomes that you've had from ERG groups?
I think one of the great ones that I've seen when I was working with a previous employer was Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And I'm a massive fan of it. And it's a real example of celebrating neurodivergent individuals and their successes and what they can bring. And in doing that, I set up that we'd share a story each day so that people could understand more. People understand better through personal stories. They're more empathetic. They know that person. I didn't realize you were going through that. So we shared a story each day, and there was some hesitation. And I think the start of the week, I was like, okay, I'll do Monday. And someone else said, yeah, I'll do Tuesday. And we were like, okay, we've not got past Tuesday, but we can do this. By the time Wednesday came, we've got 3 more names on the table.
Amazing.
Which was great. And the senior managers were starting to see difference, and they were starting to see that people were having conversations. The first one went out and there was no response back on it. The second one went out and it's like, oh, we could do this or we could do that. And it starts to bring people together to start to solve the problem and start to bring people together to share their own experiences and what they've seen. So there's so much power in that. And then you can take that and say, okay, I'm seeing a gap here, or I'm seeing something we're doing really amazing. Let's do more of it.
Thank you for sharing such an amazing example. And I also, from when you were saying that, I can imagine the connection and the engagement skyrocketed from that, because we're also breaking down the barriers and the taboo where people feel confident and comfortable to share their stories. There's so much power in sharing a story, and we spend so much of our lives at work. Why are we not going deeper to get to understand people a lot more? And I think so many employers and hopefully HR professionals listening can go, right, okay, we need to start and do that. We need to have an ERG group. But how do they begin? How do they start to formulate a group?
I think it's understanding which groups you want to set up to start off with, giving them structure and giving them finance, because money makes the world go round. You can't expect people to do amazing things with nothing.
Yeah.
So it's giving them some kind of time to start off with. Like you said, doing extra jobs with no extra time, you can't do an amazing job at that. So giving people the time, giving the structure that these employee resource groups potentially feed into end of year appraisals and those types of things, so that it isn't a thankless task, because I know lots of people that chair these employee resource groups feel like it is a thankless task. And the other big thing would be to have sponsorship, senior leadership sponsorship, where you can, people who have lived experience or are incredibly passionate, but where you can't, people that really, really care about that thing, so that they can put the time and the effort and they want to make a difference themselves. It's really hard to get that community together to move the needle, especially if you're looking at neurodivergent individuals and disabled individuals. They're trying to do a day job, plus potentially struggling, plus having pains and all these other things, adding an additional job on that they really love to do, they really want to do, but without the time, the sponsorship, it's never going to succeed. So I think they're the really kind of key things that if you are thinking about employee resource groups, would be the kind of headlines before you start.
Completely agree. And it goes back to why are we doing the resource groups at the same time? Because with neuroinclusion, it isn't just about awareness, it's about action. And it's all great having ERG groups, but if we're not going to take any action and show value in the team, doing potentially more damage than good internally, which is the absolute opposite of what we want to do. Let's talk about your business at the moment and how you're supporting leaders and businesses to be more inclusive. With any of your programs that you have you found that one in particular has really enabled and empowered leaders for the future?
I think the ones where I bring leadership skills and inclusion and culture and all of those buzzwords, but all of those things together, because so many times we're doing training, but it's separate and it's how do these all link together? How am I meant to do this, all of this, and deliver whatever I'm meant to deliver? When you can simplify some of those things, give people real tangible takeaways, things that they can do with their teams, they're the ones that I see the most amount of difference with, and that people can take these things and make actions on them. And I think the other thing I offer as well is additional coaching and mentorship after. So people, managers, leaders, team members will go through these trainings, but then you've done it and you implement something, you feel like maybe it's not quite gone right. But if that trainer's gone and they're out the window and you can message them on LinkedIn, but it's a little bit different, you want to be able to come back and say, okay, I implemented this. It didn't feel comfortable. Let's understand why it didn't feel comfortable. Is it because of privilege, or is it something else, or was it not quite right? Having that opportunity to delve into those things then gives them a bit more time to really focus on it and think about it. And that kind of additional coaching on top has been really powerful.
And that's the benefit of learning and development as well, where it's continuous. Doing something as a one and done doesn't support anybody. And I love that you're having regular conversations with especially your attendees. Do you ever find that you partner with HR professionals with your training style for leaders or employers within a company?
Sometimes, yeah. So it depends on how companies are structured. So for me, I want to understand what your policies and processes are so that when I deliver the training, I can make sure I'm delivering the best thing. But it depends on where you want to get to and how deep you want to go and how much time you want me to spend on it. So yeah, it can be kind of both ways. I think the other thing that I would really love to do more of is actually spending more time with HR. And what would be really powerful would be to be able to have just open conversations with people, because again, I think there's such a fear, and you don't want to ask your neurodivergent employees, like, how does this feel? What can we do better? And have that kind of personal experience. I love to spend time with companies and understand what's going on for them, speak to their employees, and then pass that on to kind of HR and learning development teams so that they can make a difference. I can take those, I can understand it from a first-hand perspective, and you can ask me those awkward questions that you don't want to ask because it's unprofessional or whatever it might be. They can offer some really powerful moments.
The fear is definitely a huge factor. And what we don't want to do is, like you said, bring people in a room and be like, tell me, or for anybody to feel interrogated, because it's very private as well. But how can we overcome that without anybody feeling intimidated or that they're being targeted for a deeper understanding?
So a lot of the approaches that I come at are practical things that you can use with everyone within your team. So things around like personal user manuals that isn't just your neurodivergent employees doing them. Everybody is looking at this. Where do you succeed? Like, what kind of environments do you work best in? What are you working on right now? What are you kind of working towards? What are your goals? It enables some of those conversations, and you don't have to be neurodivergent to want to work in a quiet environment. So if you can put all these things on paper, digitally, wherever it might be, it isn't just for neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
It enables that conversation for everyone. And I think, again, some of the really powerful things that can come out of that is, as a neurodivergent person, I struggle to make a first conversation with somebody. But if I can see on paper that you also really like weightlifting, I can have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Like, it enables me to know something about you before.
Yeah.
So that it breaks the ice for everyone. So there's ways of doing it without having these labels, without needing to out yourself, that are really simple. They take time, don't get me wrong, but they enable companies leaders to understand their employees better, and that their employees understand each other and have more cohesion. What's not to love about that, right?
I've seen it being done in practice so well during the onboarding
Yeah.
process as well, where profiles are shared with new hires once they've accepted the role, but before their first day, so that they can know a little bit more about their manager and their team without it being work related. Like you just said, something to start a conversation. Like, what is your stranded on a beach ideal meal? I don't know. Mine would be Thai food. I absolutely love Thai food. And hopefully that is so that someone can come and hold a conversation with me and tell me if they love Thai food or they hate Thai food. It starts a conversation. I think that's a perfect example of how we can be more inclusive for all team members. And then we can really start to build that connection. Thank you so much for sharing. I have one final question, which I'm sad because I feel like we could just keep going with this. So, really sad on this. But the last question is, looking back on your career, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
I think for me, it would be to accept myself like wholeheartedly and not try and be someone else. And I had a bit of an epiphany moment the other morning where I was like, I'm not being the consultant that I want to be. Like, I'm trying to fit into that square peg suit and I'm not that person. So I think it's definitely about understanding your authentic self and really trying to live that where you can and where you feel comfortable. The flip side to that being is, we can't ask everyone to kind of expose themselves without having a safe environment to do it within. So yeah, I think it would be as authentic as you can be in every moment that you can be, and dance in the kitchen when you've got the opportunity.
Are you a Grey's Anatomy fan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that when you said it. But no, I completely agree. And I think a really strong message from today is employers need to have a psychologically safe place to work for inclusive practices and for people to freely share what they need to support them in the workplace. And Lucy, thank you so much for today's conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Like this episode? Click here for more HR talk. And if you're just catching up, check out our previous episodes right here.